Hey, well,
Okay, we're on the air. We're live.
hello. Great to see everybody. Phil asked me to talk a little bit about Odyssey, and then I'm happy to answer questions about whatever Odyssey writing, whatever sort of things you want to ask about. So, Odyssey, I started it 24 years ago, which makes me feel very old. It's a nonprofit dedicated to helping writers of fantasy, science fiction, and horror improve their work. And I kind of started it for two reasons. I had no idea what I was getting into. Oh my gosh, if I knew that, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I started it in part because I love working with writers. And I wanted to get out of the publishing rat race where I had worked for 8 years. I was a senior editor at Bantam Doubleday Dell, and working with writers was only a small part of that job. There's so much, corporate stuff and convincing people within the company to support the books that you are bringing out, that working with the writers was only a little bit, but that was the part I loved. So I thought, how can I work more in depth with writers than I do as an editor? And I thought about creating a workshop. The other reason why I wanted to start Odyssey was because I had been through an MFA program in creative writing before getting into publishing. And none of the teachers and none of my fellow students really knew anything about science fiction, fantasy, or horror. I was that weird girl who wrote the weird science fiction stuff. And, I learned how to write some good sentences, I think. But I didn't learn a lot about writing strong genre fiction. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was something with the rigor of an MFA program, but where all the teachers and all the students loved science fiction, fantasy, and horror, believed in their value as art, and could help each other get better at it. So I left publishing. I started Odyssey. Our first program that we started was the workshop, which is held for 6 weeks each summer in New Hampshire, where I live. The workshop has an application deadline of April 1st. We let in 15 students each year because we want each person to have a lot of individual attention and guidance. And I'm the primary instructor, and we have guest lecturers come in each week of the 6 weeks for about 24 hours. So you get different perspectives on your work and different techniques from these different writers. And then we have 2 Skype guests also. So we get 8 different guests coming through each summer. Odyssey, the main thing that makes Odyssey stand out, I think, is you work harder than you would do at any other workshop that you might go to. And that's in part because I want to help you as much as I can during those 6 weeks, and in part because I know the students who come give up so much to be there, saving up time off from their jobs, saving up money, figuring out childcare. All sorts of sacrifices are made by the people who attend, and I want it to be worth their time. So we have class for about 4.5 hours every day, Monday through Friday. About half of that is lecture and discussion, and half of that is critiquing. And the lectures really involve a very advanced, comprehensive curriculum that has built up over the 24 years. We didn't always have class for 4.5 hours, but it gets longer every year as I learn more and more stuff that I want to convey to people to help them. So that's one of the things that sets Odyssey apart, is not only that you're going to work hard, you're going to spend a lot of time in class and out of class working, but that you're going to get more about techniques and principles for strong writing than you would get at other workshops. Most other workshops are more like 90% critiquing and maybe 10% lecture. So I think it's really important that you learn new techniques. Otherwise, the critiquing tells you a bunch of problems you have with your writing, and you have no means of improving those areas. So I want to make sure you have a good bunch of tools in your toolkit. Anyway, in the workshopping, we try to be really constructive. You're gonna hear the truth. You're gonna hear it straight. But the idea is to lead you to have the ability to improve your work. So it's going to be honest, concrete, and detailed, but you're not going to be attacked in any way. We try to keep egos out of it and just focus on what can help the person. You spend, after the 4.5 hours in class, about 8 hours in the afternoon and evening, critiquing stories of your classmates, writing your own stories, working on journal entries and other assignments to improve your writing. And on the weekend, you're probably working at least 12 hours a day on mostly on your own writing, but also on some critiques for classmates too. So there's a lot of work, but I think that's one of the reasons Odyssey can have such a big effect on a writer, is that you are thinking about writing, you're reading about writing, you're critiquing writing, you're doing writing. So everything's focused. You don't have the divided attention that you have in your everyday life. And a lot of students who come say they learn more in 6 weeks than they learned in 2 years in an MFA program. So I'm happy about that. Something else that sets Odyssey apart is that I'm there for the whole 6 weeks. So I'm guiding you. Before you even come, I've read 2 of your pieces and critiqued them. And so then in the first week, I read a third piece, we meet, and I say, okay, here's the 3. From the 3 stories I've read of yours, here's the strengths I see in common. Here are the weaknesses I see in common. Let's start attacking these weaknesses one at a time and see what we can do. And so we make a plan together. You can decide which weakness you want to work on first and how you want to work on it. And then we meet every couple of weeks at a minimum to see how your progress is going. So you have a sense of whether you've improved in one area, what's the next area you need to focus on. So there's some kind of sense of context and progress. And since I've worked with a lot of different writers, I can offer you many different techniques. If this way of thinking about it doesn't work for you, then how about this way of thinking about it? Rather than just, well, here's how I do it, so you have to do it the same way. I know everybody's mind works differently, and you have to find the way that works with your brain for the kind of story that you want to tell. And so my job is to help you figure that out. You also get really in-depth critiques at Odyssey, I think far more than any other workshop or class that you might attend. I have found as a former editor that critiquing the work of others has helped me so much as a writer that I think it's really important for all writers, if you want to improve. Doing the critique on somebody else's work is not like doing them a favor. It's doing yourself a favor, because you gain so much insight and you develop your editor part of your brain and your ability to analyze your own work eventually after you do lots of critiques and figure out how to make your work better. So we spend a lot of time on that. You're going to get really detailed critiques. My critiques are like usually over 2,000 words long, and I can't help myself, but they're all meant to help the author. We try to set a really challenging but supportive environment so that, I want you to succeed. Everyone there wants you to succeed. That's the atmosphere that we try to create, and that we can all learn and succeed better if we're helping each other than rather competing with each other or shooting each other down, which is kind of pointless, because shooting one person down doesn't make you a best-selling writer and vice versa, right? There's room for all kinds of writers in the world, and people make great friends. That's another thing that when I think about why, being there for 6 weeks and everything, you really bond. You make some great friendships, and writing is a lonely business. So having those friends that you can go to when you're down, after the workshop is over for the rest of your life, having people you can count on to support you is so important in writing. And that's what these Odyssey classes do. It's been amazing to see how they bond and the positive experiences that can come out of that.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
During this 6 weeks, I'm a consultant. I work for myself. I've got no backup. If I disappear for 6 weeks, so does my client base, which would not be a good thing. Is it possible to attend this, but take 2 to 4 hours a day out to focus on, my business to keep it afloat for the 6 weeks I'm there? Or is that pretty much a non-doable, way of addressing it?
There are people who have done a little bit of work through the 6 weeks, on their outside job. Not a lot, and it really depends on the individual. It depends on how fast of a writer and a critiquer you are. I would not want you to get less out of the experience. I wouldn't want you to be unable to put in the time you want on your story, and I wouldn't want you to be skimping on critiques. But some people, I will tell you, men with beards tend to be able to get 8 hours of sleep a night at Odyssey, and men without beards and women definitely are not getting 8 hours of sleep at Odyssey. I don't understand it, and I've thought about trying to have a phony beard so that I could get 8 hours of sleep. But I get about 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night at Odyssey.
Okay, now we know why Marissa chose that particular.
To my advantage.
He's got a beard and she's looking for sleep.
Yes, he would do very well. So I would need.
You don't really recommend someone who has to work.
No, I don't recommend it at all, and I don't think it's a good idea, because I think it would stress you out a lot, and it would make you probably unsatisfied with the amount of time you have to put in. But a couple people over the 24 years have done that. I don't know about 2 to 4 hours every day, but maybe 6 hours a week or something like that, spread out over some time. So something to think about anyway. Just to cover a couple other things that Phil said people would be interested in. Some of the most common writing problems that I encounter among writers that I work with through Odyssey, said you guys would be interested in this. The protagonist not struggling to achieve a goal. That's the number one thing. Either the protagonist has no goal, or the protagonist has a goal, but it requires no struggle. Usually the problem is that the protagonist is passive. He is acted upon rather than acting. He may be reactive, so somebody else does something to him and he reacts, but he's not actively pursuing a goal. So we need him to have a goal. We need struggle. We need obstacles. We need external conflict. Writers are so nice, and writers don't want to hurt anybody. So they want to help the protagonist. They don't want anything really bad to happen or to really challenge the protagonist. It's well, that's nice, but it's not really a good story. Starting with the character thinking about her life is a very common one. The character might be walking to the story or driving to the story or flying to the story, but nothing much is happening except the character thinking a lot of background information to fill the reader in on things. And that's usually not a good way to start. It has to do with handling the exposition, this background information that we need for context, but we don't want to start with it, right? We want to get the reader interested, so the reader's going, I wonder why the character is like that. And then you give them the exposition that explains why the character is like that, right? But first they have to want to know it, and then you tell them. and then that's perfect. But the thing is, writers often put that backwards. They give us the information before we want it. Stories with lack of unity. So there's all sorts of maybe busy things going on, but they don't all fit together. They don't work together to create an impact. Point of view that might be weak or shifting or distant, so we don't feel close to the character. A setting that is missing. So we get the white room syndrome. A character who's inconsistent or not developed or not believable. Awkward writing, lack of a causal chain, right? Things just sort of happen coincidentally or randomly rather than by cause and effect. And we kind of need cause and effect in a story. A weak character arc, scenes that don't really change anything. Those usually involve two people like discussing background information rather than making any decisions or taking any actions. And sometimes too much telling. So those are some common problems. Those are some of the things that I teach at Odyssey, is like how to fix those things, techniques for inserting those things, for structuring the struggle of the protagonist with the goal and all of those things, which we can talk about more if you want. And I think finally, Phil asked me to mention some of the other things that we do at Odyssey. So if you decide, Terry, that you can't, come to Odyssey because you got to keep your business going, then we have online classes that you can do from home that would not prohibit you from keeping your business going. We have webinars you can take at your convenience. You can get your work critiqued. So anything from like 20,000 words up to 200,000 words, you can get a professional level critique on. We have consultations where I just meet with people on GoToMeeting and we talk about any particular writing problem that you're having. We have a writing coach. We've got podcasts that are free, that are excerpts from our guest lectures at the summer workshop. We've got a monthly blog, and we've got our monthly online discussion salon, which is kind of like this, where we just get together once a month and talk about writing stuff, writing topics, and our progress and things. So anyway, there's a bunch of different programs, and there's a bunch of free resources. We've really tried to create these things to satisfy needs of writers who have contacted me. A lot of people contacted me and said, 6 weeks off, are you crazy? And so then we did the online classes and the critiques and things. So anyway, happy to answer questions about whatever, and hope that was of interest.
Well, A, I found out I can't go. B, I have to go rewrite 3 of the last 4 chapters, thanks to you right now. You're off. No, I'm kidding. It was informative. And I have been to your website and looked at quite a few of the online courses.
Cool.
I was hoping to find out that you had like a week course or a smaller course, because for a professional that I'm sort of trying to look like, it was perfect time frame for me. But 6 weeks as a married man who works, I could be ending a couple of different relationships there.
I would love to offer more in-person workshops of different lengths and with different focuses. We kind of need a facility for that, which is like one of my dreams that may never come true. The Odysseum, hopefully with fights to the death in the back room. Yeah, right now we hold our in-person workshops. We do have a 1-week workshop, but it's only for graduates of the 6-week program. So if they want to come back another year and get more stuff critiqued, they come to this 1-week program. But anyway, our in-person workshops are held at a college. The college only has like 8 weeks of time that we can use in the summer. So we're limited in what we can do in that setting. And hotels and other kinds of settings are so expensive. I would hate to have to charge what they would charge us for a workshop at a hotel. But anyway, I write it down, and perhaps I will be able to someday offer you something like that.
There you go.
I have a question.
Sure.
So it's kind of goes with, you have the blogs. If there are any good books you'd also recommend reading for helping with writing.
Oh my God, yes. Is this specific?
I've read Stephen King's on writing, but what else should I be looking at?
Do you have a particular area that you would like to improve on?
I would probably go with pacing, and I know I struggle sometimes with interpersonal emotions, like the romance stuff. But those are much more specific. I'm sure there's others that other people could be like, yes, this is where you have problems.
I think a couple of good books are Suspense and Conflict by James Scott Bell is very good. The Art of Character by David Corbett is another good one.
Okay. And what was the first one? Suspense and
Conflict.
Suspense and Conflict.
Maybe it's Conflict and Suspense. It's those two things anyway.
Okay. No, thank you. I'm on a reading kick. Well, I'm always on a reading kick, but I want to read even more this year. So.
Excellent. Yeah, there's so many good books on writing.
Thank you.
The best book I've read or found is a story by Robert McKay.
That's a great one.
Yeah, it talks about scripts because he's a movie type of thing, but he points out that a script, a novel, and a screenplay are all stories. They all have the same development problems. And that's I reread that occasionally because it's the best book I've read. And that's when it comes to writing.
I've definitely heard of that one.
It's big.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's fat and it's expensive, but it's really good. He has a couple great principles in there, like how every scene has to change a value of significance for the main character, which is something that's really important that most people don't know. When I first read that years ago, my head exploded. Like, what do you mean every scene has to change a value of significance? How is that possible? And now it's like, well, of course it does. Like, what else is it in the story for?
That's strange you mentioned that because that clicked with me too when I read that. I said, oops, that's what's wrong with my stories.
What's the name of that book again?
Story by Robert McKay.
MCKEE. It has a long subtitle, but you don't need
Oh,
it.
McKee, not McKay. It's McKee.
There we go, right off the bookshelf.
Yeah, MCKEE.
KEE.
The first and only book I've read so far has been The Wonder Book. I found that to be really good.
I
Yeah.
just got a copy of that.
There's some nice stuff in there. I like the article by Catherine Valenti about the things that everybody knows, all right, which talks about in a particular world, people will take certain things for granted and they will all accept certain things as true, even if they're not really true, just the way we do in our society, accept certain things to be true. And so it's really nice as far as getting you to think outside the box about how what people might believe in other cultures.
Thanks.
Hi, Jean. It's Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Hi. I'm wondering what do you see people doing after your class? Do they start publishing? Have they been publishing for a while? What kind of differences do you see, or what do the alums report back to you?
It's been a couple of years since I calculated it, but when I last calculated it, it was 59% had been professionally published, meaning published in some kind of pro magazine or with a book publisher. So I suspect it's higher because it's been higher every time I calculated it. I just haven't had time to do it recently. It varies a lot. Some of them have been published before they come to Odyssey. Some of them haven't shown anybody anything except me before they come to Odyssey. But they're at that level where they could be published. Some of them leave Odyssey and they're very aggressive. I try to encourage them to set goals, like I'm going to finish a story a month. I'm going to send it to a dozen places, those sorts of goals, things that you can control. So some are very aggressive about like trying to get 100 rejections in the first year after Odyssey, or at least make 100 submissions, and maybe some of them will be sales. Some of them, they go back to their lives and they get overwhelmed by, family and job and stuff, and I don't hear from them for years. And then I get an email, hey, I just sold my first novel. I'm like, where have you been? What's been happening? So that's exciting. The pace at which people progress varies a lot. We have Rebecca Kwong is a graduate of 2016 whose first novel came out in 2018 and hit almost every best of 2018 fantasy and science fiction list that you can find out there. It's called The Poppy War. It's a first in a trilogy. So she's doing great. Two others of her classmates, I just heard in the last month, sold their first novels. So it's been like 2.5 years, and that class seems to be exploding with good news. So hopefully that gives you some idea. I mean, it's really what you do with it. So most people are pushing and submitting and selling within a year or two of attending, but some of them, get overwhelmed by life, and it may be more years before they're able to get back to it. But most of them eventually, I hear back from, and they're writing again, and they're getting their work out published.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, my friend Brian Lynch said wonderful, wonderful things about your program a couple of years ago, and he's gotten a little overwhelmed by a new job and all that stuff, but he is still working on scripts and things, and I'm sure you talked to him, but he came back and said, Carol, you've got to do this. It's like,
Oh, Brian's awesome. Yeah.
He is. So he dumped the writing group on me, though. He started a group on Tuesday nights where we sit in a chair 3 hours and write, button chair and write. But then he got busy with his job, so now I'm sort of coordinating. So that's fun. It helps a lot.
Yeah. Oh, and I should mention that some of them self-publish. Right? I just heard from a student, from a graduate who, let's see, she's probably from 2004 or something. So quite a number of years ago. I hadn't heard from her in a while. And now I find out she's been self-publishing for like the last 5 years and having huge success. It's like, why didn't you tell me? But I'm very glad to hear now. It's great news. So some of them go that route, and that's certainly something we talk about at the workshop, is both self-publishing and traditional publishing, and which option might be right for you and what each of those involves.
I apologize for interrupting, but Villanova is playing St. John's right at the moment, and I still have weird priorities when it comes to Villanova basketball. Everybody have a great night.
Bye.
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 So what else can I help you with?
What kind of things do people send for the application? You mentioned 2 stories. Are these the things you've made your best and your brightest, I'm sure, or do you have particular types of things you look for with the application?
So it's just one story that people send with the application. Usually it's 4,000 words max. So usually people send one, although you can send 2 if they both fit within that 4,000 words. When I said I critique 2 stories before you arrive at Odyssey, what I meant is once you're admitted, I ask you for a second story. So then I get the second story. So what I look for in applications, in the writing sample, I look for originality. I look for passion. I look for a writer who has something to say that I haven't seen before, or has some element of the story that feels fresh and different. Maybe it's a character, maybe it's a voice, maybe it's the setting or the technology or the magic, but something different. I look for some strong stylistic skills as far as being able to write clear prose that's grammatically correct, because those things nobody wants to learn about at Odyssey, and they're really, really important. Things like, opening with a strong engagement, I don't care about, because that's easy to teach. So you could have a very slow opening, and while that's a problem and needs to be addressed, that's not something that would make me say, oh, this writer's not ready, because that's, again, it's something we can address easily. Something that feels believable, that where the characters act somewhat like real people that I can believe in. And hopefully there's some sort of rising action, even if the character isn't challenged too much by conflict and doesn't have too much of a goal, but hopefully there's some rising action and some suspense and some resolution. That would be nice. But I love it when I can find some fresh, unique elements, things that feel like they come out of the writer's desire to express things that are important to them.
Cool, thank you. I have another question. So you've got science fiction and fantasy and horror, and I kind of like write all those, although a little bit less fantasy. Do you find it's better for people to focus on one genre while they're there? What do you recommend?
Usually people are better at one genre than at others. Often somebody who predominantly writes fantasy, who tries science fiction, the quality is going to go way down. That doesn't mean you shouldn't write science fiction, and that doesn't mean I would tell you to not write it. But I think it means you have to be ready for that in your expectation of the reaction of people. That you're taking on something that's harder for you, or your skill levels are not at an even level with the different genres. But I want you to write things that you care about. That's why at Odyssey we allow people to work on novels. Generally speaking, people progress more quickly if you work on short stories, because we can look at the whole story and we can see, do the beginning and the end go together? Is there a satisfying character arc? Is there a satisfying conflict and resolution? Whereas with a novel, it's harder to see those things because we're only seeing a chapter, perhaps. But I know some people just don't think short. They think big. They want to write novels. And I don't think there's a lot of purpose to forcing somebody to write a short story and then basically rip it apart and show all the things wrong with it, and then, tell them to go write another short story that they don't care about. I think it's important to care about the stuff that you're working on. So I would encourage you to, follow your passion, follow whatever idea is hot in your mind at the moment. You need to start writing your next story because you got to write one a week. And after the first 2 weeks, you're not allowed to submit anything that you wrote beforehand. So you've got to write new things. You can radically revise something that you wrote beforehand and submit it, but it's got to be radically revised. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time because you will have learned so much in those 2 weeks that you'll already know 10 things that you could improve in that story, and submitting it without revision, we're just going to tell you those 10 things, and then you won't have gotten anything out of it. So, I mean, if you like writing in multiple genres, I think that's great. You have range. We have writers of different kinds of Odyssey. Some write in a very narrow band. They're interested in this kind of story, and that's fine. Then they get really interesting and creative within this little area. And then we have other people who write all over the place. And that's great too. So I have no idea if I answered that.
Yes, that was great. Thank you. And it's really nice to know you don't have to have all your stories to submit ahead of time, because that would be a large task. So that's good.
Yes. Well, a lot of times what happens is people get inspired at Odyssey. They read their classmates' stories, and it's like they've never read anything like that before, because generally people read in a kind of narrow area. They like to read certain things. And so that's what they read, and maybe that's what they write. And so now they're reading all sorts of different things, and they get inspired and they want to write different things. And I love that. And I would encourage you, whether at Odyssey or not, to read more widely than what you normally would. Because as a writer, reading is part of your job. It's not something that you do for fun. Maybe you can do a little reading for fun, but most of your reading should be done to learn. So if you want to incorporate, if you think of yourself as like seeping up, absorbing the skills and the sentence structures and the plots and the characters of the stuff that you read, you want to absorb as wide a variety of stuff as possible. So then you have all of that to draw from, right? So you want to read a Western, and you want to read a romance, and you want to read a literary fiction, and all sorts of different things, so you can absorb the world and have all of that inside of you to draw from.
Cool.
Other questions?
Oh, I do have another one. Is that okay? Many of us are in our Writers of the Weird critique group, and we do, Phil has us do the format where the story is read out loud and then people give immediate feedback. And I run another critique group where people submit 6,000 words to 10,000 words ahead of time, and people read it, and then we do, feedback and such. How does it all work when we're at Odyssey? What would people expect there?
Every morning you get new stories or chapters to critique, usually 2, but once in a while 3, for the next day. And so by the next morning, you need to have those done. So you read them. The way I advise people to do it is to read each piece twice. Because the first time you're reading it like a reader, you're reading it to find out what happens next. And gee, where are they? What's going on? So you're reading it one way the first time as a reader. The second time you can read it as a writer. And you can say, okay, I know where this is going. Did it start at the right place? Why did she choose this character to make the protagonist instead of some other character? Why did she set it in this place? Why is that the internal conflict rather than something else? So you can question and think about all the different choices that the writer made when you're reading it the second time. And those are things you just can't do the first time. So you really need to read it twice. And then, so the first time you're trying to just read it like pretend you're a normal person, not a writer, and read it like a normal person, and try to not make too many notes, but to remember where you had reactions. So you can just note down, confused here, question mark, or surprised here, put an exclamation point or something, so that you record your reactions. Like if I ever get a theory about, I think the butler did it, or I think they're going to end up together, I write it down on the manuscript right where I had the theory happen in my head, so that the author can know. That's what I'm thinking. But those are like reader reactions. Then the second time, you're thinking about it a lot more. You're analyzing. You're writing way more stuff in the margins, questions to yourself or questions to the author about various things. And then you type up a big fat critique. I give a bunch of questions for you to think about and answer, having to do with every element of the story, the characters, the plot, the setting, the style, the theme, the symbols, the genre, all of those things, so that you can kind of examine them all and see, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what suggestions might you make to improve it. And so then the next day we come back, we get in the big circle, we go around, everybody has their say. It is timed because we have limited time in class, and that way everybody gets the same amount of time. And then the author at the end can ask questions or follow up on anything that was unclear. So that's how we do it. I think the various methods have their advantages. Hearing it out loud is certainly interesting, and can give you different effects than reading it on a piece of paper. But I like having people have time to really think about it before they have to respond. I know for myself, lots of times I'll come up with better insights after I've slept on it for 3 hours. Any other questions or thoughts? You want to share anything you're struggling with in your writing or whatever?
I mean, I basically am looking at your at the critique service, and I really apologize. This is a stupid question, but I don't know where to address the check to. Like, is it addressed to Odyssey Critique Service?
You can just put Odyssey. That's fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I guess it's not on there. I will go at it.
Yeah, I mean, I was like flipping to the other options to see if it was there, but no. Because that's something that is really interesting to me, because I'm kind of very focused on this particular universe that I have. I work full time, so I don't think I have enough time to kind of keep writing and kind of developing. But of course, having focused critique on this submission will hopefully show me other areas that I'm lacking, or I can make an effort. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I think the critique service is really good for people who need to know how this particular thing they're working on is doing, and want to really get, some serious level feedback on it. Because, you can listen to a lecture or something and that can tell you the abstract principles, but if there's not the exchange of work and feedback, then you don't really know how you're doing on those particular issues.
How long does it take to get the feedback from those critiques, and what's the format that it comes in general?
So if it's something like 20,000 words, then it takes 60 days to get the feedback. If it's a full novel, like 100,000 words, then usually we need 90 days to turn it around. And we do everything on paper because I know nobody likes this, but studies have shown that if you critique on a screen and if you look at critiques, at feedback of your novel, edits on a screen, that you don't see the big picture. You see the window of text, and within the window of text, if you're critiquing somebody else's story on a screen, you're going to make comments about how to rearrange the window of text, cut stuff, or whatever. But you're not going to be thinking about, usually, how page 1 fits with page 20 or page 100. That it's much harder to do those larger scale suggestions, edits, changes when you're working solely on a screen. And so that's what studies have found, is that people tend to do more big picture changes and comments when working on paper. So you're sending a paper manuscript to me. I'm sending the manuscript to the particular critiquer. We got 5 different ones that live all over the place. That person is marking it up, typing you up a critique, sending all of that back to you. So then you end up with a big paper manuscript with comments on it, and the letter. And that's why maybe someday we'll have to stop doing that, because people do say, why don't you do this electronically? And, you know, I understand it's a lot easier and cheaper to do that. But I do think the feedback you get is better the way that we do it. But we'll see.
So you're looking more at developmental edits, not just surface edits.
Yes. Yeah, it's not just like line editing. It's very much more substantive than that. Yeah, we don't really offer, if people just want like line edits, like a polish or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could give that, but they would be paying the same amount, so they probably wouldn't be very happy. Yeah. So we're really looking at more bigger picture things, as well as the line by line, you know, are there awkward sentences, are there wordy sentences, or whatever. I'm working on an article right now for Fiction University, if you know that website. It's Janice Hardy's blog. It's about flow. And flow is something that's so hard to quantify. You know, you say, well, this is flows, or this doesn't flow, right? But I had a few insights reading the prologue to Stephen King's novel 11/22/63 about flow. And so that's this article I'm working on right now about that. And that's something I think so many writers don't think about and don't know that they need to improve on the flow. But ever since I studied that prologue, and I lectured on it last summer at the 1-week workshop for Odyssey graduates, I did a lecture on it that I'm turning into the article. And ever since then, it's like, I don't know, now when I read something, I can see so much more clearly when it's flowing or not flowing and why. I think that's really something for writers to focus more on, and for me to stress more at Odyssey. So hopefully this article will turn out okay. People will understand it. I have no idea whatever the question was, or if I answered.
I think you did.
Okay, thank you. It's good to see you, Diana, by the way.
Thanks, Jeanne. I appreciate that. Good to see you too. I've seen you in email a lot. That's been about it.
Yes.
So, I guess one of the questions I had is it possible you might be going to offer more online classes in the future, seeing as there was such a response, it seemed, this time out?
It's really blown up like the last 2 years, but this year especially. It really, the number of applicants just blew up. And I think it's in part due to the posts that George Martin is making about Odyssey. You know, he started this scholarship for a horror writer to attend Odyssey each summer. And so we had our first recipient of that last summer. And I don't know. And then we have a really good publicist this year who's been helping with the publicity for the online classes and stuff. So I'm not quite sure what to attribute it to. Maybe it's just to 24 years of hard work. I don't know, but it's probably George Martin. So one thing I was thinking about doing, that I would like to do, is to offer a longer online class, something that could maybe help guide people through the process of like writing a novel, where it could go on for some more months. I'm not quite sure how many months. I'm open to suggestions if people have suggestions. And I would love to expand our online offerings. I'd love to do mentoring online. So there are definitely things I'd like to do. I've heard from a number of people, of writers, who would like us to offer online classes year round. That's really hard to do because we're small. I mean, it's basically me and then people who do specific tasks and volunteers. But that would be perhaps possible if I felt there was enough interest. And I guess now maybe I do feel like there's enough interest. That's a really good question, Diana. That now that there is this huge interest, maybe we need to serve our community and achieve our mission, we need to expand on those. I never really felt before, like 2 years ago. We've been doing the online classes for since 2010, I believe, so 9 years. Yeah, I never really felt like we needed to do a lot more than what we were doing until maybe last year. And this year especially. Yeah, so that's a good question. Maybe I need to figure out how to do that.
Well, I was wondering if you might want to think about an on-demand component, possibly with like the Teachable platform, or linking it to your current site. That might be a way to bridge some of the gaps, since I know you're, and charge a reduced price because it would be an on-demand course. That would be possibly a way to do it. And then that way that would be there all year round. The person would just have to enroll. They would get some of the insights. Obviously, it wouldn't be as good as the online or the in-person, but it might be a way to bridge the gap. Can you tell I teach as my day job? Just a thought,
Yeah. Well, we have the webinars, but there's only a couple of those, and they don't go into the depth of the online classes. Mm-hmm. And I do record all the online classes in the event that a student, has internet connectivity problems or whatever, or wants to just hear it again because they want to absorb it more. Mm-hmm. So we have those, but I guess I feel bad about offering it without offering the critiques that go with it. That seems so important. Maybe that's just stupid of me, that it would be better to offer half a thing than none of the thing. But I don't know. I feel like it wouldn't help people as much as I would like it to. But that's a good thing to consider. So I will consider.
I agree. I loved your critique. I mean, I know you were giving them back very quickly from the class applications, but I saw a couple more things, and I went back and I pulled that chapter apart yet again. So hopefully by the time I see Don Juan at Futurescapes in April, he'll be happy with that in my chapter 2. We'll see.
It's going to be awesome. I know it's going to be awesome.
Well, you definitely had a hand in that, so thank you. I've learned, don't let characters stand around too much.
Yes, we writers are a very thoughtful bunch.
Aren't we though? Oh, but it's hard. I mean, maybe it's just me. I'm doing a major editing pass right now on the whole book. And I'm finding I'm layering in a lot now. Like before it was skeletal. Does anybody else like do it like word slinging and then go back and fix it? Or do other people sit there? I have a friend who says she literally thinks about every sentence before she writes it like 5 times. Is anybody else a word slinger, or is it just me?
That's what I do. I write fast, and then after I finish the first draft, I go back and start cleaning it up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't stop for the first draft. I don't stop and go back unless I have to make a note, and change something that because of stuff that had happened later on. But I just plow through a first draft and then start fixing it because the first draft is bad.
I mean, I'm finding it easier to put as many words up as possible and then crossing out the ones that I don't like and then putting up better ones. Especially because I write a lot of poetry now too. So with poetry, constantly just put down everything on the page and then rearrange it into the order.
Now, I'm curious, do most writers, if we were to take a poll, is it mostly people plow through the first draft then? I mean, Jeanne, even like with what you see with the Odyssey applications, I guess you see a similar evolution maybe?
Well, there's certainly many writers who will go very quickly through a draft and then go back and try to make sense of it and strengthen it. But there are also many writers who are what I call like brick by brick writers who will agonize over each sentence. And once they write the sentence down, or once they decide that's it, after maybe revising it a few times, then it's like a brick. They feel like they can't get rid of it. And so they won't put it down on the wall until they're sure it's right. And then they'll move to the next one and they'll put that brick in and so on. And then it's very hard for them to revise because they have put so much thought and effort into each bit. So the task with them is to try to get them to loosen their hold on stuff and to admit, no matter how much time and thought you put into it, no matter how many times you've revised it, it's just a draft, and probably a lot of it needs to be changed. The people who will sling their words around and write the draft fast, oddly enough, they're often not willing to do a lot of revision either because they don't like sitting down and agonizing over each thing. They want it to be fast and fun. And so sometimes with some of the writers I work with of that type, they just want to write a new story. They see so many problems with it. They're like, okay, I'm just going to start over and write a new thing and go real fast through that, and then not want to spend a lot of time revising it either. So it's not like one way is right and one is wrong, or one is easier and one is harder. They're all hard. But if you can maintain the willingness to make changes and believe that it needs changes, that will help a lot because they pretty much all do. It's a very rare writer who can write it perfectly the first time, and we hate those people.
That's what, 1% of the population, maybe?
I hope it's less than that.
I feel better though. I'm glad to know it's not just me. Some days you feel like it's just you.
Yeah, definitely not. Oh my God. That's why it's so good to have writer friends. Like, it's great that you have this group where, other people understand. There's so many, it's just so hard to explain the craziness of writing to non-writers.
It is.
I have a terrific idea. We've got a nice group right here in mostly New Jersey, even though I'm in Tennessee. Why don't we host Jeanne to come down to us for a workshop?
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a pipe dream, I know.
I was born in New Jersey.
Ah, cool.
Well, I work at William Patterson University and County College of Morris. I suppose if you needed space, I could talk to the facilities managers at both. You know? I mean, classrooms with tech.
Right?
Odyssey on the road.
It's just a heck of a commute, right, Jeanne?
Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to commute every day, but
We'd have to find you a nice hotel. Well, I know there's a Radisson near William Patterson, come to think of it. Like, it's easily, you know, it's like within a mile or two of the campus.
mhm.
Oh,
Hmm.
just say the word and I'll start asking.
Hey, well, you know, I'm open to things. If I'm not sure exactly when that I would be able to do that, but I'm open to, like, if you guys want to explore that more.
Wow. That just popped out of my head, but who knows? It might actually be a good idea.
Even if it was just a weekend or something, you know, I mean, it could work,
Yeah, maybe a weekend thing.
you know?
Hmm.
Even if the university wasn't willing to host it, I mean, we're in Jersey. We have everything. We can find a place. You know? Too bad the coffee shop near my house has such a small room. They actually rent it out for meetings, but you can only cram about 6 people in there.
Wegman.
Wegman?
Wegmans has a conference room.
Really?
Grocery store, that's a riot.
Oh my
I
god!
put that in quotes, but they do have a conference room.
Interesting.
I mean, it is Wegmans, so
So they don't charge too much? Is that what you're telling us? Unlike, say, like one of the hotels?
no. I mean, I don't know about that. I'm just saying that Wegmans has everything. I mean, when it opened when I was a senior in high school in Virginia, like everybody just went to Wegmans. It was where we met for a lot of our high school tutoring sessions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've not thought of a grocery store with a conference room.
Do we get free food?
I can't tell you that. I just know that they have a conference room, and I guess they host conferences there. I've seen it. At least the one in Montvale.
Well, I'm sure there's a salad bar, so.
There is. There's they have good sushi. They have good food.
Do they have a bakery with good coffee?
I know they have good coffee. Their bakery's set up differently than the one that I'm used to. But the one that they had in Virginia was awesome.
I like it. Odyssey on the road for one weekend only. Oh.
I kind of see it on a billboard.
Standing room only.
Danny, you have a cat coming over your shoulder.
Yes.
Oh, that's Pippin.
Pippin.
And Reepa Cheep is with my hubby.
Pippin looks exactly like my Echo, so now I'm getting homesick.
I'm sorry. I'm sure I'm sure you can, I'll tell Pippin, he's your virtual stand-in right now.
Exactly. Yeah, 11 days with no cats is going to be very hard for a female writer, I have to say.
Yeah, how do you do that? I mean, you need the purring, you need the constant headbutting to remind you you're alive.
Everything I own is covered with cat hair, so it's really okay.
That's why Terry can't come over to my house. She's allergic. But I can't give up my cats.
Yeah, that's cool. Actually, that's one of my biggest concerns about coming up to Odyssey, Jeanne, is 6 weeks of the cats not not having somebody at home is kind of crazy. You know, I'd have to get somebody to actually come in. Right now I'm lucky because my youngest kid is home from college break, but they're going to graduate and move in the summer, so it's hard.
Yeah, the college doesn't allow any pets in the college housing, the apartments that we use. It's possible you could rent an apartment somewhere nearby that would allow that. But I totally hear you. I have a cat who needs insulin injections twice a day. I can't go anywhere.
Yeah. I didn't. Oh, well.
Night, guys. I have to sign off.
Good night. Nice seeing you.
Okay, bye,
Bye,
Jay.
Jay.
Yeah, I'm afraid I have to check out too, and since I'm the moderator, I got to kill the broadcast.
All right.
I feel like we've had some great information, Jean. We may have sort of run out of all the questions in our head, but I think this has probably sparked a lot of good thinking in people, you know?
Yeah.
Oh,
It
good.
is, yes.
Well, tomorrow night is the Odyssey Salon. It's the second Wednesday of every month. So if you feel like you want to drop by and ask some more questions or talk about anything, feel free. It's anybody can join. It's a GoToMeeting that Odyssey hosts. You can find it on our website. Just click on Salon. So feel free if you want to hop over there tomorrow night.
Oh, that's fun. It'll be something to do in hot Tennessee here.
Hot Tennessee, I'm jealous.
70 degrees. I don't know why. Yeah, that's crazy. Okay.
Thanks for setting this up.
Okay, I'll get in touch with you tomorrow about getting you a copy of the video.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
for watching everything, Hank, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye, guys. Bye, Denise.
Bye, Diana.